Hi, so our group had case study number 3. An RDN discovers misinformation posted by another RDN on a blog. The blogger's posting is not in agreement with a reputable science-based non-governmental organization recommendations and current science evidence. The RDN reader is familiar with the topic because he or she consults a food company that relies on the NGO's information to support their brand's messages. The RDN reader knows that the blogger is incorrect and perpetuating myths, and also worries that it could be considered a conflict of interest for the RDN reader to correct the blogger on the site. So for steps 1, we wanted to identify the facts. So misinformation posted to a public forum by an RDN, and the RDN reader is hired by a company that relies on NGO/science-based evidence. Who is involved? The consumers who are reading this forum, the food company that the RDN reader is hired by, and the RDNs involved. Then we asked the question, what other information we would need. So one of the information that's missing is whether or not the RDN who posted the misinformation is being paid for by a particular company for promoting that content. And then the other question we had was whether or not more research on the topic of the misinformation needed to be conducted to understand where it came from and why it was incorrect. The second step was to connect the facts and the situation to a couple of principles from the Code of Ethics. The 2 principles we chose were non-maleficence and beneficence. So for non-maleficence, we thought that this would relate because the RDN blog post, the RDN who posted the blog is publishing information that is potentially incorrect, and depending on the type of information being shared, it may end up causing harm to the individual reading this information. And then we thought that beneficence was involved because the RDN writer could be in a violation of this principle by communicating false, fraudulent, or deceptive statements, which can contribute to the incompetence of her readers by promoting a non-evidence-based information. The RDN reader is also involved in the code of beneficence because they need to consider whether or not not calling out this RDN for posting this information would be contributing to the incompetence of her colleagues and her profession, while also respecting the values of the other colleagues and weighing that benefit over the risk of either offending the RDN in this situation.
So for step 3 of the decision-making process, we had to apply the Academy Code. So within the 4 principles, there are 32 standards, and we felt that 9 out of these 32 standards were applicable to this case study that we had. And the standards that we identified were standard 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2E, 3B, 3C, 3D, and 3I. And just as a brief overview of what these standards encompass, we kind of felt that they were split between the RDN who was writing the blog and the RDN who was reading the blog. So we felt that the RDN who was writing the blog was in violations of standards that included providing unbiased, evidence-based scientific knowledge, providing accurate and truthful information, as well as contributing to the advancement and competence of the public. And the RDN who was reading the blog was not necessarily in violation of any of these standards, but we felt that she needed to take them into consideration when she was thinking about how to go about addressing this dilemma. And those included the fact that she has a conflict of interest, being that she is a consultant for the NGO involved. And also she needs to be aware that she has to respect the rights and values of her colleague, which would be the RDN writer, as well as contribute to the advancement and competence of her colleagues. So for a few specific examples, the first one is standard 1B, and this standard addresses the RDN's need for in-depth scientific knowledge on the subject, which we felt she was in violation of because the information that she was providing on her blog was not in in accordance with the scientific-based evidence that has been published. Another example is Standard 3D, which refers to the RDN's need to refrain from providing statements that are false, misleading, deceptive, or fraudulent. So it was mentioned in this case that the information being provided was supportive of a myth that exists. So in that situation, the information that she is providing is misleading and deceptive. And the last standard is Standard 3I. So this one states the RDN should contribute to the advancement and competence of others, including colleagues and public. So in regards to the RDN who wrote the blog, we felt that she was in violation of this standard because she was not providing information that would help improve or advance the competence of the public, since the information was invalid. And for the RDN who was the reader, this was an opportunity for her to contribute to the competence of her colleague by informing the RDN writing the blog of the current scientific literature. So those were just a few examples of the specific standards that we felt were involved.
So once you kind of work through all that background information and know, kind of have a grasp on what's going on, the next steps are more in regards to the decision, so how you would select it, implement, and monitor it. So in terms of selecting the decision, there could be a couple different ways you go about this. One, you can just ignore the post altogether and allow the misinformation to continue to be posted. Two, you could comment on the blog post itself, letting the blog writer and all of the people reading it to know that there was an issue there. Or you can reach out and communicate with the RD who wrote the post. So we decided to contact the RD. We felt that this would be the best way to go about it. So to do this, we wanted to do a few things. One was to create awareness. So make sure we know the correct information when we're reaching out to them, and do this in a professional way that is more of providing information for them, and trying to clear up any confusion or lapse of judgment, or just to reiterate the fact that all RDs must uphold this, the code of ethics. So also because the RD who read the post and is reaching out may have a conflict of interest, it would be good for them to mention this to the blog writer as well. So once they've kind of made contact with the RD and see where they're at and share all their information, additional steps could be taken if needed. This is the step 2. So if they are not willing to edit or take down the post, or are kind of not responsive to you, it may be necessary to go to either a higher up person from them. So if they're working for some company, maybe go to a manager, or to contact the academy in order to really get this situated out. So in terms of monitoring to see if this was actually done or not, it would be mostly just to check in and see if the post was taken down or updated in order to reflect the best information and be scientific based. Also, to help make sure that this doesn't happen again, just make sure that the RD who wrote the blog post remains aware of the code of ethics and how this applies to all of the RDs within the field. So in summary from this activity, it was really helpful, and it is helpful for RDs to continue to refresh themselves on the code of ethics and what types of information goes into this. We need to be familiar on all of these steps so that we can implement this within our lives, and doing exercises like this kind of help to refresh our memories and work through situations that we might encounter in the future. So for discussion, we came up with a situation that was modeled after a real life situation that we came across. So the scenario would be, you're a dietetic intern working with a new RD. Your patient is largely unstable, but will be requiring initiation of TPN tonight. The supervising RD adjusts your recommended TPN order to help the patient quickly reach the goals. However, the patient has really bad blood glucose control, is at risk for refeeding syndrome, and is really difficult to keep stable. You feel as though the fast rate of the TPN advancement could cause harm to the patient, but the dietitian dismisses your concerns. So for this scenario, it would be helpful to follow that ethical decision-making guideline in order to determine a good course of action and how to handle situations like this. So in total, this exercise really helped us to get a deeper understanding of the code of ethics and how to uphold ourselves to those standards.